Welcome to the Pro-Black Perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions. Your host tonight is the author of the Pro-Black Compendium and Zuberi and the Maroons of Ma'at, the Pan-African Nationalist, Oni. Oni, what are we discussing tonight?
Peace, family. So tonight we started a little late because we were, waking up a little late. We're gonna actually dip into the Carlos A. Cook's reader. So for those of you who don't know, I compiled that book. That book is selling for big money on Amazon and other bookstores, and so I got it for free in the description of the of this podcast. So what I want you to do is you download it while we're waiting, right? You download it, but in the meantime, make sure you listen to this description of the different programs on KWAZ Radio, and be sure to check them out, all right?
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Greetings, everyone. This is Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast, inviting you to tune in to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the revolutionary matron on KWAZ Radio.
You are listening to the Pro-Black Perspective on KWAZ Radio.
All right, fam. So we're gonna tune into the Carlos A. Cook's reader. I wasn't really sure what to do today. I low-key, I woke up late. I went to bed late. You know what I mean? Woke up late, went to bed late. Honestly, I was thinking at first I was going to read about the Bandung Conference because I thought that was something to read to you guys. But it turns out I actually already read it. So if you guys look on YouTube about Onitaset and Carlos Cook, you're going to see I read the one called Ross, so on and so forth. I think Ross and the Cast. I think it was actually this one right before. So first off, I want you to, when you get this book, you could either go to, if you have the book, you can go to page 133, or if you have the PDF, you can go to 77 of 161, right? And we're going to go into this Yankee Doodleism versus nationalism. I didn't read it recently, but I think I'm going to be able to explain it to you guys pretty well. What we're going to do, I'm going to show you guys this Ross and Weekend thing. Here's Ross and Cass. The thing I liked about Ross and Cass is where he talks about the Bandung Conference, because the Bandung Conference, or even like essentially how the Asian and African states said, hey, you know what? Let's try to like counter these Caucasians, kind of counter these NATO characters, and the idea here is that they didn't want to invite like essentially they recognized that a lot of the quote unquote African American leadership was subordinate and answering to and like essentially servile to the European leadership. And so one of them actually did make it to Bandung, but they gave him like a little kid's room pretty much. And notwithstanding that, when he returned, so it says the member nations of the Bandung Conference concluded that they might as well invite the white man himself if they invited the caste Negro, because the caste would come back and tell the white man everything that happened, right? And this is the conclusion of that chapter. So make sure you could listen to it or you could read it. It's a pretty interesting paper. But he says they were not wrong in that assessment, because as soon as Powell, Adam Clayton Powell Jr., returned to the United States, he called a press conference. He said he wanted an immediate meeting with Eisenhower because he had some inside information on the Arabs' plan in Algeria and other plans of the Bandung Conference. A few weeks later, Powell was at a meeting in the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C., and he attempted to block a segregation bill and disbursement of budgets to the public school system. an old decrepit cracker from West Virginia got up and knocked Powell down. Some say he shined his shoes in Powell's rear end. Powell got up without striking a blow and said, "He who throws the first punch admits defeat. Nobody takes the cat seriously, and that is why you were not invited to Bandung," right? One cause, one goal, one destiny. So I wanted to read that again, but because I already read it, obviously I know most people haven't listened to it, but you can go back and explore that for yourself. I can't really, like, for the people who do listen to the content pretty regularly, I can't necessarily, say, hey, look, well, like, I can't not show appreciation. So that's one thing. I'm sounding a little bit thing. I see that. So right now I don't see anybody in the chat, or I don't see anybody viewing. That's fine. With so much go on, we're gonna just read this. A lot of people can catch it on the playback, but we're gonna just read this, and then we're gonna get through it, right? So Yankee Doodleism versus nationalism. Now, retrospect, I think I should have done a Book of Power reading, but it is what it is. Make sure you guys check out the Book of Power. And in fact, just a lot of people like to play music before their podcast starts. So I'm not gonna say it's music, but I do have a description of what you can expect in the Book of Power. And there's a beat made by a sister I know in the back. So you guys check this out, and then we can on the other side we can start reading this book. All right.
Okay, so I know books, alright? So let me tell you about a book. Alright, check it. So the goal and objective is to be selective, electing for knowledge with the black directive, checking sources, heritage, and legacies, with the brilliance to defeat our nemesis. The Book of Power, so aptly named, esteemed and famed for informing the brain, and doing the same as the ancestors before us. Sankofa, afterlife chorus, wisdom is the key against dangers. How the ancient leaders will lead the changes. We are doing Africa with no strangers. Do you hear us? Okay, hold on. We can't continue to beat the second fiddle. African power is the end of this riddle. To build a nation, the likes which never existed. The motto heretofore, we persisted. Better, we resisted. Best, we building. We'll raise the roof and break through the ceiling. Peeling away the change we were given to stop just surviving, start thriving and living. Africa's about to host superpowers. China and US back up in time hours. No one can be free without freeing themselves. But freedom is shown and owned on bookshelves. The Book of Power, a key for liberation. There's no domination where there's education, because ignorance is man's main weakness. All of exploited if we don't teach this. Then the pages, the stages, king and queen. Akapong, Delaney, Dessalines, Niere, Garvey, and Zinga, and Cooks. 500 pages to pass both books. The task is told to bring up a continent. You will hold the tone for the confident. Have some pride and push forward your chest. Your leaders are reading one of the best. The book has science, covers violence, self-reliance, and does away with silence. The time has come for the work to get done and build up a land that be second to none. We'll organize, acknowledge, strategize a new Africa before our eyes, and blackness will be the complexion we see. Anytime we envision what it means to be free. So come join minds, read what is written. Hear resolutions, no longer hidden. Nothing works in theory, all that works, works and works. So it's time to put ourselves first. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Tell your friends, family, and neighbors. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Tell your friends, family, and neighbors. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Tell your friends, family, and neighbors. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Book of Power. So the Book of Power can be purchased on Amazon. Just click on the link below. Alright, send me on tap. Tulene ma'a, tushine is fact. Tulene ma'a, tushine is fact. Tulene ma'a, tushine is fact. Oh, tap.
Word. I probably should have done a analysis of those lyrics. One of the lines is, "And blackness will be the complexion we see anytime we envision what it means to be free." You know what I mean? Like, it's what a free person looks like to some people's imaginations, right? Is not a black person. In fact, to a lot of people, including in Africa, like, to be free, to be unlimited, to essentially have the good life, right? A lot of people envision white people, And the reason why I say that, because usually I would say maybe that's like an American bias, right? Because obviously in America you might think, well, white people are living the good life, right? But even in Africa, like a lot of people were, well, when I was in Tanzania, a lot of people were telling me, hey, I want to go to America. I can't wait to go to America. There's some reason to go to America. And it's like, why the fuck would you want to go to America? You don't even speak the language. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people don't even speak the language that well, kind of thing. But, it is what it is. Let's get into this reading and just go from there. So Yankee Doodleism versus nationalism. So there's two different types of mentality. And so I want people to understand that Carlos A. Cooks is a good brother. My reservation, right? Like I said, I think the three best Africans of the 20th century, and that's including, I guess, us, but not really including us, but you know what I mean. The three best of the 20th century were Marcus Garvey, Carlos Cooks, and Julius Nyerere, right? Marcus Garvey was just so good. He was so good. So you have to put him like top, right? Carlos Cooks and Julius Nyerere, they are both in second place, But this is, of course, of the billions of Africans of the 20th century. And like we understand, we are also technically, if you're over 20, 23, you're technically an African of the 20th century. These Africans were great thinkers, The thing with the critique I have on Nyerere was obviously the socialism. And of course, now that I went to his nation, I'm, I'm not as critical of, oh man, look at your nation now. Although I do like Nkrumah's better, a little bit. But, he's amazing. He's incomparable. He united Tanganyika and Zanzibar. He united the ethnic groups in Tanzania, to which nobody talks about ethnic groups per se. Like everybody knows they have an ethnic background. They may have weddings in their ethnic traditions, but they are Tanzanians through and through. They speak the national language, which is an African language, And East Africa, or the East African Federation, is still one of the forerunners for African unity, for Pan-Africanism. Nyerere was definitely ahead of his time. I think, like I said, the socialism issue, the economics issue. I mean, of course, when you read his literature, he's pretty damn versed in economics too. So realistically, he was really good. So when it comes to Carlos Cooks is also really intellectual, really smart, really focused, really versed. The only issue I have is that he was in America too, So that's the issue I have with myself, is the issue I have with Carlos Cooks, So he's a Caribbean brother from the Dominican Republic, actually. The same place where people say, I know black, I Dominican, right? He's from the Dominican Republic, and he is, but he gets it. He understands what it takes. The only issue is that he's active in America. Now, he's actively putting together a repatriation program, among other things, but notwithstanding, it's realistically what Africans should be doing, and a lot of Africans have done this. The thing about authentic Pan-Africanism, the limit about authentic Pan-Africanism is this, right? Most people listening to me are from the Anglo sphere, okay? And essentially the Anglosphere is inferior when it comes to Pan-Africanism. However, because of the limitation of language, right, you do not know what other people are doing outside of your language. You can't understand it. You can't decipher it, right? So there's evidence of, for instance, some Brazilian groups that left Brazil, right, and went back into Africa, certain countries, and became the elites of certain African countries, or a certain African country. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but there is evidence of that, right? And they basically built up the economy. They basically did the repatriation and creating a community outside of like a community inside of Africa from the diaspora. They've done that. Okay? Or like, for instance, Kebi Saba is pretty interesting as a French speaking African. But and then, like I said about Swahili and what happened in Eastern Africa, there is so, like, we tend to highlight what we are doing or have done from America. We don't necessarily like we're not really like that's the issue. Like, that's realistically the issue. And so, whereas I think Carlos Cooks is amazing, and here's actually the interesting part about it. Here's the bad part about it. If he did not come to America, and if he just went from the DR into some Spanish-speaking country, for instance, and did the nationalism from there, right? We probably wouldn't hear about him. If Marcus Garvey didn't go to America and just went into and by you probably wouldn't hear about him, I don't mean he wouldn't have done as significant. What I mean is that essentially the American centeredness of the Western world, right, of the Anglo-speaking world, kind of makes it so that whatever is good that happens outside of America isn't really known in America, because I even remember, so shout out to the brother Chakra. I remember he was I was listening to one of his videos, and they were talking about some English woman who was like protesting the colorism of Europeans, like white, like British men who were like holding back the women from like working in certain, because they were colorists and they didn't like the hair, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, I've never heard of this lady. And they in England are like, yeah, it's big thing, like, oh yeah, this lady, so on and so forth. Never heard of this woman. Don't even remember her name, right? It is crucial that we understand that we are like one of the issues of Pan-Africanism in general is that it's so American focused. And this is something that the xenophobic movements were pointing out. They're like, yo, we're in the center of Pan-Africanism because of the information bias that they receive in America, right? Where it's like, you talk about a Pan-Africanist and they're all the American Pan-Africanists. And you don't talk about and like you might know of the Pan-Africanists in Africa, but only the leaders who are killed by Americans, actually, right? But or with American assistance, but like realistically, everything is kind of focused around America in the American narrative. So America has this really big stronghold on what propaganda is in their country, even to the point of the people who are anti-American, like the ones that you hear about are the ones that are American, and you kind of see why. In fact, back in the other article where they were talking about the Bandung conference, where essentially, like, what point would there be? Like, essentially, unfortunately, it's like, what point is there in engaging the African American in Pan-Africanism? And that's really like kind of my issue with probably my issue with Carlos Cooks is that, realistically, there's no reason to engage Black Americans. Now, you can, or you could be like, hey, Black American, go to Africa, you know what I mean? Repatriate. But I wouldn't give my life to it. You know what I mean? I would say go, like, just go, like, return to Africa. And if you don't, you don't. But it's like, it's not a year's process. And you might say, well, only it sounds like, that's exactly what you're doing, right? That's what I'm saying. That would be my critique of myself too. You know, like life is not so easy that, you know, the best thing is the only thing you can do. I mean, the best thing is the first option. You know, I don't know if you guys heard. I have some audios of me, you know, flexing in my complexion, obviously, but I have some audios of me discussing, like, for instance, helping this woman out in business by, let's say giving her $500, right? Say, here's $500. You know, what can you do with this? And she's pretty much like, shit, I need more money. You know what I mean? Like, I ran out of money. I can't do anything with it. You know? And it's like $500 is not a little bit of money in her area, but the reality is that not everybody has the business acumen, or even when you think you have a good idea, it doesn't mean that reality works in your favor. You know, the world is not like essentially your good idea is a fantasy, right? How everything plays out in your mind is not how everything will play out in real life. And that's just the ways of the world, you know? So that said, you know, I don't necessarily fault a person, but I would say that that is a fault in the sense that if we are talking about what is ideal, right, or what is the best of the fantastic world, you know, being in America is more or less a waste, unless you are, you know, unless you're making bank, which, you know, for what it's worth, I don't know if you guys know this, but, or you should know this, you should read this book, but Carlos Cooks was a property owner in America, right, in New York, and that's why, what's his name, Dr. Clark didn't like him. And he called Dr. Clark a disgrace to his race, you know, which is interesting because today we all, you know, who's the Pan-Africanist historian we all like is Dr. Clark. But Dr. Clark was a socialist, right? And what's interesting is that there's this discussion going on on Twitter at this moment, which probably means nothing to most people who might be listening to this in the far future. But they're like, hey, Malcolm X was a socialist because of so on and so forth. But a lot of people don't realize that he was mentored, or one of the people who wrote helped him write his organization for the next one was Carlos Cooks, and was also Dr. Clark, you know? So he consulted with his elders, which is pretty interesting. Anyway, whoa, I still got no chat, so that's pretty cool. Sorry, Yankee Doodleism versus nationalism. So there are no legitimate reasons why we can't get together. We all have the same background. There are no aristocrats among us, right? So when he says there are no aristocrats among us, he's talking about America. And he's like, you know, realistically, we don't have any elite, which is pretty interesting, right? We suffer the same humiliation. The cracker's hatred is deep-rooted, and nothing can change the cracker. The present strategy of the cracker is to kill the caste with kindness. The war in Asia is a long, hard, grueling struggle, and many caste will be wasted. So he's talking about the Vietnamese War, right? And caste are the African American, like the useless African Americans, right? A lot of Yankee Doodleism is pumped into the caste youth. He is being shown that he can get his equality in death. The caste receives his citizenship posthumously. In order to keep his phobia alive, the cracker gives the caste a hero, a dead one, of course, right? So, again, this is pretty straightforward. I like it, but there's some words that I just coded, so it is what it is. He says, it is only these northern cities that have any international political orientation. Therefore, the cracker concentrates his money and propaganda on those areas. Now, this is another really important thing that, you know, we talked about this. You look at the different clips I have of me dialoguing while walking through the streets of Brooklyn, right? You know, with alcohol in my system, right? Anyway, so in one of these northern cities that have international political orientation. So that's something to recognize, that human beings, for the most part, do not come with international political orientations. And, you know, I say this as a father, right? the international political orientation that my 7-year-old has, right, is only something that I would equip him with, or what a public school system would equip him with, or what a black organization would equip him with, right? But realistically, it bears no, like, it has no bearing on his ability to survive, you know, in this world. You know, a lot of not like the only thing that really impacts his ability to survive is my my like my I say cultural will, political will, or his mother's political and cultural will. At least right now, right? Obviously, if we both passed away, maybe the state or a family member, relative would take him in, and that would, help his survivability. And obviously, that's not guaranteed, and it could just be that if the two of us were to pass away, he also too, he too would. But, that would be obviously a misfortune. But it's also a part of reality, right? That human beings at young ages cannot necessarily take care of themselves, right? Well, not at that age, and it depends on where you are and where things happen, such that there are consequences for human death, right? But again, the international political orientation. Generally, here's the thing that I can say about my experiences, and that's kind of one of the things that I really want to remind people, is that a lot of times I'm speaking from my own experiences, but when you go into, let's say, a rural area, right, there's no reason for them to be abreast on the economy of the world, right? The only economy that you're focused on in the rural areas should be the local economy. It should be essentially, let's say if you have land on a farm, right? Your concern should be the weather. Your concern should be the weather and the price of seeds, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, there's a war going on in Algeria, or there's this protest going on in Algerian cities, there's in China there's a flu outbreak, that kind of stuff. Sometimes and occasionally things reach the village, but to be well versed on the international political orientation in the village, or the international political world in the village, it it's just a peculiarity. It's not a necessity. When life is really simple and simplified, and your basic economic function is already spelled out. It's your father's function, his father's function, and his father's function before that, where marriage and sex and children are your predominant foci, right? It's not like the idea that you would be oh yeah, what's going on in the world, you can, but it's very unlikely, because another thing, that in order to be truly abreast on the world, you should have a sufficient collection of books, a sufficient collection of information coming from outside of your locality, and often that's not going to be the case. In the northern cities, you can have bookstores, you can have political groups, you can have the politicians nearby, the news outlets, the electricity for this, so on and so forth. In rural areas, not so much. So even in America, the distinction was between the northern cities and the southern rural areas. But he says, therefore, the cracker concentrates his money and propaganda on these areas. And that's actually a really, I keep forgetting to go back to that. But that's something that remember Ani spoke about too in Yurugu, where she says, essentially the cities that the European constructs are like essentially tools for propaganda, you know. So it's again, you know, one of the things about reading, or one of the things about just observing, is that you begin to pick up on the clues of the world, like the reality of the world. You would focus on the cities because the cities, like there's economic opportunity in becoming well versed on the world, right? Why is there economic activity in being well versed in the world? Because if you're trying to, essentially, if you're dealing in so how economies work, right, is that mainly profit comes from trade, right? Profit comes from trade. It's like I was saying about the sister who owns the bar here in Tanzania, right? Today is Ramadan or something like that, right? Oh, Ramadan has been going on, I think, for the month or something like that. She says her sales in alcohol have declined sharply. She's, of course, asking for more money, obviously, right? But and you know, it's like, what am I gonna do? But the thing with that is this: that she has the beer in the bar. She has the bar. She's working at the bar. You know, she's sitting down in the bar. Nobody's coming in. Wealth does not, wealth is not about the resources, which is the alcohol. Wealth is not about the labor, which is her sitting there ready to sell. Wealth is about the trade, the exchange, right? And like what price she can set, and the price she sets can be of market value. You know, it could be above market value. It could be below market value. What is market value is just a subjective term for if somebody buys it at that price, then that's the market rate. You know, that's pretty much it. I mean, obviously, you know, you can. Well, no, I mean, I don't want people to think it's more complicated than that. It's obviously more complicated than that, but you don't have to believe it's more complicated than that, because it is what it is. If she says, hey, during Ramadan, I'll sell the beer for cheaper, obviously, right? Supply and demand. I'll sell the beer for cheaper. That's the market rate, you know? And if she's like, after Ramadan, when everybody wants to get their drinks up, I'll sell it for more expensive. That's the market rate. You know, whatever it is that she chooses to do in order to make that sale, more or less, that's what it is. So it's like, you know, having that trade. So why do I say that? Because again, the international, like the cities, you can make money from different, or you can make better trades if you're better informed on what's going on in the world. What are the rates of your neighbors? And those sort of things, those sort of ideas. You can make better money from making better business decisions, and those better business decisions are come about through better information and better knowledge about the businesses in question and the businesses of the world. So that's really one of the things you want to study. Let me see if there's any. Damn, I'm like talking to myself. You know, there's like nobody, no comments popping up on the screen. He says, okay, so you also have the group of supposed to be African nationalists, the quasi groups. And here's the thing that a lot of people don't realize. These supposed to be African nationalists he's talking about, the quasi groups, that would be like your Nation of Islam. But he says it in another part of the book, or you kind of glean it from other parts of the book. But essentially, this is another aspect to how a lot of the information that we get is whitewashed, because a lot of people don't even know who Carlos Cooks is, right? So a lot of the information that we get is whitewashed to the point where we're like, the most radical person of the 1960s was Malcolm X, whereas even Malcolm X would say, oh yeah, no, it's Carlos Cooks. And actually, if you pay attention to the and again, like, because everything's whitewashed, you would overlook things. So if you pay attention to the beginning of Malcolm X's autobiography, right? He tells you his father was a part of the Garvey movement, obviously, and he also says that a lot of his radicalism, or a lot of his activities, came around the Buy Black movements, right? So the Buy Black movement is Carlos Cooks. You see what I'm saying? So a lot of us talk about the Buy Black movement today we don't recognize that it's rooted in Carlos Cooks, as well as like I think he does the first black beauty pageant type thing, right? Or one of the first, I don't know, but like an African nationalist, natural hair, beauty standard type stuff, right? Carlos Cooks was that person, and then there's like another, like a third thing that is pretty interesting. Probably even this Italian war thing. We're gonna get into it. So he says the cracker has all. Okay, so the cracker has all his pillboxes and booby traps outside these groups. Yeah. So we don't make any secret about our outlook. We will air it anywhere. If you are not inhibited, you look at a man as a man as just a man and act accordingly without panic. Now this is actually pretty interesting. Now he's going to talk about some good shit, you know. But before we talk about some good shit, we're going to talk about you got to look at men as just men. You know, I'm in like I said, I was on Twitter, and some people are like, "Yo, man, Malcolm X and Fred Hampton and Martin Luther King Jr." And it's like, shut up. You gotta realize that the men of the past were just men of the past. They were not superhuman. They were not exceptional. I mean, they were exceptional. They were, I would say, ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances, right? But you just got to look at them as men. And even the white people that you engage with, you just have to look at them as other quote unquote human beings, or if they are, whatever. But, you just got to look at them as other animals. And you yourself are another animal, like that's what it is, at the end of the day, we are these animals living these animal experiences. And we kind of give too much meaning to, our intellect, and not enough to the reality of our condition. Like we would quickly belittle a dog's intellect or belittle a cat's intellect, but then when it comes to man, we say, "Oh no, he is divine," and it's like, yeah, that's just your imagination. We are all but animals, obviously. We have a different capabilities, we have different capacity compared to dogs and elephants and so forth. But at the end of the day, we are like just animals too, right? So in 1935, we used the Italian-Ethiopian War as a pretext to halt the economic encroachment and exploitation by Italians in Harlem. So he's like, in Harlem, like essentially they used the international war, right? They said, hey, these Italians are attacking us in Ethiopia. Let's stop supporting the Italians, right? Because if you think that things are bad now, you should have been around here in the 30s, right? So he's talking in the 1960s, right? You had less than 6 licensed cast saloons. The Jews and the Italians had a complete monopoly in Harlem, right? So back in the 1930s. So they used the Italian-Ethiopian War, which was between World War I and between World War II. Between World War I and World War II, they used that war as a pretext to like boycott the Italians, right? So at 126th Street and Lenox Avenue, there was a bar named the Roca Bella where black women were practicing sodomy with white men, right? So obviously there were prostitutes, black prostitutes, right? We decided to close the Roca Bella. Talking about this idea that the white man going after the black woman was comparable to the passport bro phenomenon. about Carlos Cooks. You know, right? But if you see the data, right? Bar. You have things like, the story of Queen Califia, where essentially white people left Europe to go to California under the belief or the pretext that there were black women, like naked black Amazons there. You have his mention how who had his fill of black women, but still tried to shame a white woman for dating a black man. Actually, I think it was Malcolm X. She was dating Malcolm X, and she was like, "Why are you doing? What are you doing with this guy? You're a pretty woman." But he had his fill of black women. So as to say that, there is that strong parallel between not necessarily getting. Oh, actually, there was actually an explicit take from a white man, in fact, who said, or a white person, right, who said that he gets with black women as practice so that he can get the real white women that he desires. And so the statement that I made was something along the lines of essentially, I probably could just look it up, but the statement I made was something along the lines of white men. Let me just look it up, actually. I think when you're not that desired, like when the woman that you want, you can't get her because you're not so desirable, you then leverage your money, right, to go for the woman, like go for women who would overlook your lack of desirability for your money, and so that's what these passport bros do, and that's what these white people do. Like it's not the women that they want, but it's the women that they can get with money. Now, let me see if I could just find it pretty quickly, because the language was pretty good. And honestly, it was one of the more images, right? If it's a black man complaining about a white woman with no. Blah, right? So it's to say that the parallel between the passport bros is there. It's just a reality of the economic system and how economic. I mean, the best thing is the. Hold on a second. Damn, how long did I have no audio? Did I just do my whole podcast with no audio? That's fucking crazy. Let me see. Did I have my whole podcast with no audio? Oh, that's crazy. Oh wait, no, you gotta realize that the yeah, okay, intellect or belittle a cat's intellect. So I guess I had the whole podcast with no freaking audio. All right, so that sucks. Okay. So basically, I was saying was this. Damn. All right. Yeah, I don't think I got much else to say then. That's a little bit sound cutting in and out. It seems. Yeah, I think my mic keeps unplugging itself. Well, I don't know if it was plugged in or not, honestly, which is trash. So I don't know how much you guys heard about this. So I'll just go over this again. I said, white guys sleep with black women for the same reason passport bros sleep with Dominicans. The men aren't prized in their desired demographics, so they seek women of lower economic standing who are willing to overlook their social awkwardness for their money. Then I read this one, which the guy says, a white man explaining how desperate black women are. He says, yeah, I know a lot of black females who hate black men. It's almost like a personality or character trait. They think they hit the jackpot when they date a white dude or something. My entire hockey team passed around a couple of black female valedictorians, by the way, which are considered the top academic successes of high school, honestly. But the valedictorians, because they were so desperate. And remember, high school was like kids. Anyway, because they were so desperate to be with a white guy, they were following a couple of my teammates around trying to get them to be on their social media. If you're struggling to date a strong 8 or 9, so he's like, the white women who are pretty, start with a black chick, then build your confidence up to what you're really interested in. And then this one is the other one where I say, when I said the parallel with the passport bros were there, some people denied me. Now, if you change the white man's image to a black man's and the white woman's image to a black woman's and the Asian woman's image to a DR African, take away the guns and toys, and then you have basically that. And so this was just again, look at that effing mud shark salute. What a kind of brainwashed bitch only dates black people, fucking confused black babies, feminist cunt, dad, I want to be president. Now this is more like it. And the Asian woman says, I would never sleep with a little Asian guy, never. Only whites, right? And so why this is something is to say that if this were a black man, you could hear him saying, ew, look at that, feminist bitch. Look at her, she's a divester, she's a fucking stupid. And then, the same kid, that I want to be president, but it'll be a white man with a black woman. And then this black man would be like, this is more like it, a servile Dominican woman. And the Dominican woman's like, yeah, I would never, although I don't know if the Dominican woman's talking shit about the locals of her own people, but like that is essentially the parallel. Anyway, so I got to figure out. Oh, sorry. I forgot that I'm sharing the screen. Oh, I'm not even sharing the screen. I'm not even sharing the screen. So this was the animation. I mean, you guys probably saw it before if you didn't just cut off, but yeah. This is it. This is the image. So, yeah, we're just gonna wrap up pretty much, just because. So, let's go back into the literature. So he says, so this was me explaining the Rocabella and the bar and how the thugs, the local thugs were, the local thugs were trying to stop the protests against, black women being sexually exploited by white men, and how after the thugs were unsuccessful, the police tried to come in, right? So here's where it's interesting. He says, a woman warned me of a plot between the mafia, the local thugs, and the police to kill me to stop the campaign, right? So again, and it was really important that he says the police, right? The police are trying to kill him, right? This is the political structure at hand. So they're trying to protect the economy. See what I'm saying? The police are there to protect the economy. And the thing is that everybody will tell you this. Everybody knows this. We say, hey, police are actually supposed to protect the property or something like that. Something stupid like that. But it's like realistically, they're trying to protect the economic order. That's what politics is about. Politics is about protecting the economic order. Police are policy, are basically defenders of the economic policy. So a woman told him, hey, look, man, these police are trying to kill you. They're gonna try to kill you in order to stop the campaign because they figure, you're the head, so on and so forth. So he says, I listened to the woman and talked it over with the men. We planned a 5 to 7 minute skirmish, after which we would move out. The nationalists left the skirmish without a scratch. So they said, okay, if these people are going to move in on us, we know what to do. They had a skirmish without a scratch. And here's what happened. He says, result, 1 dead cop. A lot of whipped head, a lot of the whipped head cast people, a lot of cast got their asses kicked. And the Rocabella bar was closed, And so he's saying, look, the main point is that if you panic around information, you go wrong. Always prepare yourself for any eventuality, and what comes, let it come. So essentially, yeah, they had the heads up. They knew that the police were coming for them. Now, he didn't sit back and run, he said, okay, come, I got something for them. And what happens is one of the police are killed. And because one of the police are dead, the bar is actually closed. The protest is successful. So that's actually pretty damn good. And that's why I think for myself, I say, if Carlos Coast was in Africa, it would have been probably much better. Now, would he have been in the leadership? We don't know, right? Just like when I went to Africa, was I in the leadership? No. You know what I'm saying? like was I in the leadership? No. Dave Chappelle goes to Africa. He gets to speak with the Ghanaian president. That's fucking cool. Now he doesn't really implement any policy, but I go to Ghana. I don't get to speak to anybody. So it is what it is. But that's partly because I'm not necessarily a big owner in capital, right? Anyway, so let's keep going though. The main point is that you panic around. Oh yeah, so the hireling of our struggle is the N-word. He will do anything within his power to ridicule, demoralize, and stymie the hopes and aspirations of the race. The N-word is the ready and willing tool of the white man, and it's getting worse every day. At one time, the nationalists were the only ones using the term Uncle Tom to ridicule the bad character of the race. Now the Toms use the term to ridicule other Toms. You have people masquerading as nationalists and ridiculing nationalism. The antics of the hypocrites don't surprise me. It is the behavior of the people that does. The people are so goddamn dumb. I usually use the G word, right? The people go for the same tricks year after year. They support everything phony. We play it honest and get very little support. So that's another thing too. Because you kind of hear this. Like you kind of see this in, let's say what I'm doing or a lot of other people are doing, right? But I don't want to put that on anybody, right? I'll have to speak for myself. But yeah. And this is like part of me, I realize, hey, look, the commoners can be dumb. And that's the thing that we in the movement tend to dislike, is that we don't want the commoners to be dumb. The commoners can be dumb. But not just the commoners can be dumb, the commoners are dumb. Like, it's not just that they can be dumb, it's that they are dumb. And they are going to fall for the same tricks year after year, because if it's not broken, don't fix it. This white boy is, like, I was talking with one of the women I supported, her business, a long time back. She's like, oh, it's boring if I keep putting the same advertisement up, the same advertisement. The only people that are, and it's like you have to sit her down and talk with her, because she doesn't get it. She doesn't get it. Like, shout out to Bitter Medicine, shout out to Buana, right? But like the reality is that, I had to explain to her, in this world, only certain people are going to help you in certain ways, and not everybody's going to help you. So Buana is like a helpful brother, particularly for Bitter Medicine, and that's like if that's like if like and I had to explain to her that that's something that if there are people who are helpful to you, you should nurture that. You should value that, and she's just like, oh no, some people are helpful to me, but I want to do something else, and like I need to attract more helpful people. It's like, yeah, I get that, but realistically, what you're doing now is not that. Like, you don't want to alienate the people who are helpful to you, and I think I learned that one time. I just explained to her I learned that one time, like earlier in the podcasting, when somebody pointed out, hey man, don't alienate the people who like you, like that's one thing you're not supposed to do. And so like with white people, it's like they are not, when they are propagandizing against you, they don't alienate you. Like what you got to notice about white people, or for instance, like white Democrats, they never talk about publicly how they think you are inferior or something. They never badmouth black people publicly. You get what I'm saying? Because they're like, why would I alienate you? Why would I, like, even if they feel like you're fucking stupid, right? They never say it. Like the Democrats, look at their propaganda. They're never critical of black people. Like, here the Democrats are. They get your vote all the damn time from doing nothing for you. I'm not saying nothing, but like not really going out of their way for you per se. Not really, to any sort of extent. And they know that's stupid of you. They know that's stupid of you. They know that they are more beholden to other people. They do not say it. If the Democrats came out tomorrow and said, hey, you know what? We really got to go for these Jews. They're helping us out more. We really got to go for these Jews. They're more sophisticated on international politics. We got to go for. If they went out and said that tomorrow, it may be the death knell to the support that black Americans are getting. So what they're doing is they're saying, hey, look, use the same trick year after year. Be phony. And I'm not saying that, you as an African person should be phony and you as an African person should not be honest. But, like I was telling this lady, I was like, look, I'm telling this sister, look, I sell books. And I just say that I sell books. I don't really sell books. You know what I'm saying? No sound at all right now? Oh my gosh. But then when it comes, I'm dumb. Let me see something. Maybe that was a little bit before. Let me see. Well, I think the sound's on right now. Hold on a second. No sound at all right? Yeah, I think the sound's on right now. I think maybe you might have to fast forward a little bit. I think you might be a little behind. Let me type it to her. I just typed it. So what I was saying was that, you know, like I say, I sell books, but then I was like, I'm explaining to her, because I'm like, the good thing about my life right now is that I don't have to rely on selling books. Because if I did rely on buying books, I would be dead, or I would have to change up my MO. But like, I was looking at Twitter, so there was a conversation. Malcolm X was a socialist, and here's what a lot of people who are a lot of people would say is that they say, somebody says Malcolm X is a socialist, and other people would say Malcolm X was not a socialist. Look at his words, you know? That's a good way to, you know, honor Malcolm X, you know, give out, you know, propagate him, so on and so forth. I don't do that. I'm honest. Okay, so what me as an honest person, I go and I say Malcolm X was a 39-year-old who died in a cult. Who died after expanding a cult for 12 years. He was an ordinary person, you know, under extraordinary circumstances. That's not what you say if you're trying to sell books, and predominantly, honestly, to African Americans. You know, you're supposed to respect their ancestors. Not their ancestors, but respect, you know, you're supposed to just respect, like, you're supposed to be respectful, honestly. You don't say that somebody was in a cult, even if they were in a cult. You don't say it. Or you do say it, but you say it in a certain way. But there's a way to go about with things, you know? A better way to navigate would be like, because like if you want to do the same tricks year after year, you could say, Malcolm X is so much better than Martin Luther King Jr. And black folk will flock to you. You know, they'll flock to you. Or you say Malcolm X, then you say, oh, I like Martin Luther King Jr., but I love Malcolm X. Right? That is something that's consistent with Western propaganda, or consistent with, I don't want to say it's consistent with Western propaganda. I want to say that's something that's consistent with the reaction that Western propaganda would give you. You know, essentially, the way how the white man teaches American history is that he shows two different groups of black people. He says, here's Martin Luther King Jr., here's Malcolm X. Martin Luther King Jr. is the good leader, and Malcolm X was all right? But he had this sort of belief that black people were oppressed and white people were redeemable. And so if you're studying this as a high schooler, you say to yourself, Malcolm X sounds all right, you know? And so understanding that is the programming. Because again, Malcolm X, like I said, you know, if you really get down to it, like I said, you read this Carlos A. Cook's book, and you will see that essentially Carlos A. Cook is the erased person, right? And Malcolm X has his Islam, and Malcolm X has his transformation, his return to, you know, essentially integrationism, kind of. Or not integrationism, but kind of like racial harmony type thing, right? In the sense of he like goes to Mecca and he's like, oh, white people and black people, like white people are not necessarily devils, right? Like inherently, maybe the white American, but not white people per se, which is not something you would want to turn around and say. Either way, it's like, if you understand the psychology that black people are coming from, that's where you should start and stop. Or maybe not start and stop, but stop near there. Or start off with that. You know, you don't say, hey man, this guy was in a cult. Right? Because it's like, whoa, you know? So I was explaining to the sister, I was like, yeah, I don't do the right thing, you know, when it comes to being a bookseller. I don't. And I'm okay with that. Because again, like, I'm not really, you know, in the world of like depending on, like, I print books so that people can have information. So people can read information. I don't really print books for money. You know what I mean? But if I were printing it for money, I would focus on doing the same tricks year after year. I actually have this, if you guys look at the Discord, so make sure you guys join the Discord. If you had to look at Discord, there was this white boy, he was like, he's making good money, like millions of dollars, right? Doing the same trick over and over again on Instagram, you know? making the same content, the same video format over and over again on Instagram. Because of whatever, right? So he says they support everything phony, we play it honest, and get very little support. The way things are moving in this world, it won't be long before the world condemns, and this is actually pretty interesting, the world condemns America as an aggressor and a troublemaker. So, of course it was long. If this was 1966, it's like half a century later. Although I'm not saying that they weren't condemning America before, because everybody was. But like whether it means anything to condemn America and you're not in a position to defend yourself, it doesn't matter. It's like if you tell me, hey, like if I'm like, hey man, I don't like gangbangers in Brooklyn, but I'm not in a position to outgun them, then it's like it doesn't matter, right? So he's like, it won't be long before the world condemns America as an aggressor and troublemaker. It is time we make a stand and let the world know that we do not share the views of the white ruling hierarchy of America. Again, the white elite, right? And he recognizes it. And that we have our own peculiar and unique views independent of the white man and all other men. But of course, that's not necessarily the truth for most of us, or most black people in America. Because again, he's saying, look, the people are really, the thing I like about the Marxists, in a sense, is that they have this phrase where they say, the ruling ideas are the ideas of the ruling elite, or something along those lines. I don't know what it says verbatim, but it's along those lines. And like, that's realistically, again, culture coming out of politics coming out of economics, right? Essentially the ruling class are also the people, are also the class with the ruling ideas, right? So anyway, we just subscribe to the self-determination in the true and pure sense. We must get to the clean and clear minds of our people in order to build the institutions to get out of here. And that's what it is. Like, and again, that's my biggest critique, is that you should already be out of here. Like, you should already be out of here. Obviously, it's not, like, you can say things and it won't necessarily materialize. It takes time. You can't, like you may not have good economic opportunities abroad, right? You just might not, like I said, I bought a farm in Tanzania. And I'm not saying the farm would have supported me in my life, no, but weather was bad. And so the farm is just poverty, right? So it says you can get more out of hate than you can get out of love. And this is actually a pretty interesting thing to end on. He says, look, you can get more out of hate than you can get out of love. Hate is the tool of the cracker. The cracker is a methodical and consistent hater from the cradle to the grave. He equips the caste with love, right? He equips the, basically the Uncle Toms, the Coombs, the sellouts. He equips them with love, right? And actually, that's what I said. This is actually goes back to religion. I don't know if you guys heard in the last podcast, we were talking about how essentially Jesus was like, love your enemy type stuff, right? So he says, is it any wonder that the cracker always wins, right? And obviously it's not always going to win, but that, in the past he wins consistently. Anyway, so that's pretty much the whole podcast. I'm get out. I understand there was an audio issue, which sucks, but it is what it is. That's partly why you got to be in the chat. I honestly wouldn't have known unless Bit of Medicine says something. So make sure you guys check out the live when it's live. But other than that, that's all I can say. Appreciate Provide Triggers for coming through. Bit of Medicine. Obviously, Brother Kofi. And that's it. Shem Hotep, Uncle John, Saneb Neb, Amen Ma'ad, Dua Netra. And of course, I didn't mean just those three. Everybody who comes through, appreciation. Shem Hotep.